So on Good Friday, I was walking down the street to my friend Mike True's house. He lives about 3 houses down from me because he picked up a package that got delivered, and I don't trust people. So I like to make sure they don't sit out there too long. So Mike grabbed that, and I realized the world had changed over the last week. You see, people have begun to mow their grass. And I have a policy, me personally, I will never be the first, but I will not be the last. I will never be the first to mow my grass, but I will not be the last. So on Good Friday, I had nothing else going on, so I decided that I was going to go ahead and mow. So I went back to the shed in our backyard, opened it up. First time, opened it up, and there was a cobweb. Now, what you need to know about me, I don't like spiders. I won't say I hate spiders because hate is sin. But I will say I have slipped into sin a few times because of spiders. I have gone that direction. So I walked into that cobweb, and it was on my body. So then I did my best impersonation of the YMCA dance at 10 times speed, making sure that there was no spider on my body. I don't think there was. So I got in, got my mower all set, went out, mowed the grass. Took a little while because it's the first mow of the year, right? Kids forgot to pick up the sticks, even though I told them to, so I had a parent as well in that process, right? There's maybe a threat happened. I'm not sure. Kind of blacked out. But then I got my mower, I got it back in the shed, and I have to put down these little tracks in my shed to get the mower in. So put the tracks down, I drove in, and I drove right into a new cobweb. That spider's juicing, I'm pretty sure. And he just really wanted to make sure that my shed was prepared. So I got it all off me. I parked the mower, turned it off, put the things back, and I locked the shed. You know what I can almost guarantee? Next week, when I go to mow my lawn, there's going to be a cobweb. I can almost guarantee, I'm almost willing to bet it. I actually, for this sermon, almost went into the garage today to see if I could take a picture of a cobweb, because I'm assuming it's there. And I think that's how most of us constantly live. We are constantly cleaning up cobwebs in our lives without ever dealing with the spider. We're constantly cleaning up the cobwebs in our lives without ever actually dealing with the spider. Now, today's Easter Sunday, so you have expectations about what I'm going to preach on, right? Some of you expect that I'm going to talk about the women very early in the morning. The women went to the tomb. That's one, right? Or about John and Peter running to the tomb and the fact that John wants the entire world to know that he beat Peter in a foot race, right? Maybe it's about the topic of doubting Thomas and I won't believe, or the people on Emmaus. I'm not going to talk about any of those things today. And I'm sorry if I disappoint you. My expectation is that you probably know that story. You probably know the Easter story about Jesus rising from the dead. And we've already sung about it, right? We're going to sing about it some more. So I think you kind of got that one down. So the what is not that important today because you already have the content. And if you don't, let me know. I can love to explain that to you. But today I want to talk about the why. See, so often we talk about the what, and we celebrate the what. The what hasn't changed. I basically do the same book report every week. It's the same book. The what hasn't changed, but the why is what changes us. So I want to talk about the why of Easter. John, who was a disciple of Jesus, he was at the cross with Jesus. Jesus told him that he was going to take care of his mother Mary. He wrote a couple more books of the Bible, and he wrote this book on the island of Patmos called The Revelation of John. And in this book, John is writing this vision of what he's seen. And this is what it says. When I saw him, I fell at his feet as though dead, and then he placed his right hand on me and said, "Do not be afraid. I am the first and the last. I am the living one. I was dead, and now look, I am alive forever and ever, and I hold the keys to death and Hades." So John's recording the conversation with Jesus. Jesus says, "Do not be afraid." It's interesting how many times that God or the angels have to tell humans, "Do not be afraid." There's reason for there. There should be some fear. But he says, "Look, I was dead, but now I'm alive. He is risen." Try it again. Get you one here. He is risen. He is risen indeed. So he was dead, and then he wasn't. And so often that's like, it's so cute to say he is risen indeed. That's a declaration of war. The statement that Jesus is making is a declaration of war because the enemy of all of humanity has been defeated. And that battle is still raging on in our lives. That's what we see in the scriptures. It's a declaration of war. He has been resurrected with authority and power, and he shows it. I was dead, but it couldn't hold me, is what Jesus says. And now I hold the keys to death and Hades. So why is that important? Since the Garden of Eden, when sin entered into the world, we have not been right. Sin is just missing the mark. It's not living the life that God's called us to live, not being who God has created us to be. And that's because of our own ambition, our own greed, our own lust, you can insert your own thing that you want to add in there. But for some reason, sin is in this world. We see that from the Garden of Eden. And God decided that he would not let sin be the only disqualifying thing, that would not be able to hold us back. So he chose a people called Israel. And he gave them a system of laws, of rules and regulations to be able to live into the reality of who he is and who God has called him to be. It was all based upon a system of God loves you if. So, you would live your life and then you would sin. And what you would do in that space, if you broke one of those 613 rules of the Old Testament, you would go to the temple, you would make an offering that would bring forth forgiveness for your sin. It was a system. God loved you if you did what you were supposed to do. And if you didn't do what you're supposed to do, God made a backup plan just in case. That's Judaism. That's the system in which they live by. So following God then became behavior modification. Don't do that. So I feel like parenting is sometimes. There's 613 laws, and if you break one of those laws, it's okay. You make a sacrifice for it. You pay for that. But the issue is that we couldn't stop. We still can't stop. If it was just about behavior modification, we cannot modify our behavior well enough to not sin. It's not possible. We just can't do it. Think about when you decided to break free from something. Now, let's not take sin. Let's talk about everyone's favorite thing, dieting. How many times have you decided you're going to diet, that you're going to get healthy? And you're going to white knuckle it, right? You're going to change your diet. You're going to go cold turkey. You're going to not drink any more soda. We're not going to drink any more coffee. We're going to make sure we're not eating any more sweets. We're going to go keto, the carnivore diet, the herbivore diet, the OR diet, whatever one you want to choose, right? We choose all these things, and it lasts for about a week and a half. Why? Because it wasn't an actual adjustment in our lives. It was a behavior modification. We are going to punish ourselves, and we're going to muscle through, white knuckle it as hard as we can, because we know we need to be that, and we think this is the way to do it. And that's what we do in all of our lives. And with sin, there's no difference. It doesn't work. We can't just behavior modification our ways into a better way of living. We can't just fix it in that way. We just keep sweeping up the cobwebs. That's all we're doing. When we decide there's a sin in our lives, then we're going to almost going to fight it. All we're doing is sweeping up the cobwebs. And activity sometimes makes the spiders go away for a little bit. Spiders don't often build their webs over places with a lot of activity because they get broken down. But then something happens. Because something always happens. There's a pain. There's a sickness. Something happens at work. One of your children or a grandchild, something happens in their life and it becomes such a priority that everything else has to stop. And then all of a sudden, the systems that we've made for behavior modification, they can't function anymore because a cog has been removed from the wheel, and here come the cobwebs. And we've gotten to the space where then when we get tired and vulnerable, things happen. And we think it's just supposed to happen that way. I mean, think about this. Who here has dealt with the sin so long that you're almost tired of apologizing for it? It's been the same thing over and over, and every single time you decide after an Easter service or a Christmas Eve service or whenever it is, you have a moment of absolute shame with that sin. You think, I'm not going to do it anymore. I have declared. But it doesn't work. It's just cleaning up the cobwebs. And it may work for a little bit, but it's not a long-term situation. Here's the issue. That's not Christianity. That's Judaism. You've been living a Jewish life. I'm sorry. You also broke about a dozen different food laws in that process as well that you probably need to pray for. You see, in Judaism, if you break a law, you make an offering, and we do this of ourselves, right? God, if you just forgive me this time, I promise I'll never do it again. God, if you can just take care of this one, I promise. Anybody else ever done this before? Made bargains with God? No, I'm not the only one. That's Judaism. That's, I can forgive my sins with my sacrifice. I'll screw up, I'll do better, and I'm going to offer an offering, and that's what's going to happen. But Jesus is different. It said in Revelation, he holds the keys to death and Hades. Jesus didn't clean up the cobwebs, he killed the spider. He saw the symptoms of what was happening in the world, but then he actually saw the root cause of it. It says in Ephesians 6:12, our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. You're not struggling because you aren't trying hard enough. It's not that you're not giving it your all. It's because the game is rigged. You're playing a rigged game. Welcome to the casino. And then we get mad at ourselves. We fill ourselves with shame because we can't win a game that's rigged against us. We can't win a game that is actively being played by others. But Jesus destroyed the power of our enemy. Sin has been judged, death is broken, hell has been robbed, and the enemy has been defeated. Easter isn't Jesus surviving death, it's him conquering our oppressors. So often we treat Easter as this awesome thing of, Jesus got back up, yay! But that's not what happened. He defeated the power of sin and death. That should make us excited. But it doesn't, because we still feel like we're fighting against sin and death. Maybe you haven't felt that before. Because the reality is you can live a life with good things and not have Jesus. It's true. You can have a good marriage. You can have good kids. You can have a good job. All that's possible. But here's what happens. The enemy, that spiritual force of wickedness, that thing that is trying to keep you in oppression, will poke its head up. A cobweb will come up, and it will derail. It always does. And it happens to Christians and non-Christians alike. The difference is that Christians have a hope in Jesus and non-Christians don't. So then we are trying to figure out what to do, and we choose false saviors. We choose the white knuckle. We choose self-help. We choose shame. We choose accountability, but only alone. We choose better routines, or we choose church attendance, which is not a requirement for salvation. It's important. But we choose to put these systems into place, these ways in which we can do it on our own. And I'm not saying discipleship doesn't matter. Discipleship matters. Practices matter, but they can't save you. You can discipline a dead man into better habits, but only Jesus can resurrect them. So what do we do? How do we live into this life? How do we stop the Jesus started it, now I have to fight through and finish it mentality, and get to Christ won, and now I get to live from his victory mentality? Well, there's a couple ways to do that. First is stop hiding and start surrendering. Stop hiding and start surrendering. Jesus can heal what we confess, but he can't resurrect the things that we keep burying. So often we think that our sin disqualifies us from relationship, not just with God, with each other. Think about it. If you have been a person in church before, you fall into sin, something happens. I saw this a lot when I was in higher education. You have the kids that are good kids in high school, and they go to college and they get a little wild. I was a freshman resident director in RA. Kids get a little crazy their freshman year. That's what happens. But because of what's happened in their life, they feel they disqualified themselves from going back to church. And that's our fault. Because we have made this system in our churches and our lives that you can only come here if you've gotten it together. That's not what God said this is supposed to be about. We're supposed to be able to come here and share what's broken in us and not be gossiped about and judged about it. To not have to fear someone's going to post our laundry on Facebook. But instead, you're supposed to be able to help me fold it. But we hide it. So how do we stop it? We stop hiding and start surrendering to God. Number 2, we stop trusting our willpower more than the Spirit. It's not about being stronger than sin. It's about being united with the one that's already defeated it. Galatians says, so I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. If you are not trying to do this Christian life with the power of the Holy Spirit, then you're not going to succeed. It's not possible. We have literally something called the Old Testament that talked about how people were trying to follow rules and regulations to get to God, and never once did it work. It still doesn't. We are the ones that put the laws around this thing. We put barriers and boundaries. We decide who's in and out, and God says that's not the plan. Because none of us could do it without him anyway, so why do we keep acting like we have the answer? This Christian life is supposed to be different. It's supposed to allow us to rely on the Spirit. And that means listening to the Spirit and doing what the Spirit said to do. It's that simple. The Spirit will speak to you. That's a promise. I can show you in that space. It's not magic. You got to just shut your mouth. That's it. You have to stop you so you can hear. And then when you hear, you do. Christianity 101. But so often we think that the answer is willpower. I'm just going to force myself. I'm going to set an alarm at 5 a.m. every day to read my Bible. That doesn't work for anybody unless they're a 5 a.m. person. The Spirit has to do that work, not you. But yet we still try to white knuckle our way through it all. Number 3, stop settling for clean up bondage. You're not set free, you're just better dressed. You see, this is something that happens a lot in the church. I often say that United Methodist Church, UMC, for a long time has stood for upper middle class, and that is the group that you need to be in order to feel accepted within the United Methodist Church. Because there's certain expectations, right? We have to dress a certain way, look a certain way, be a certain way. You have to have your affairs in order. That is the stupidest thing in the entirety of Christianity. But it's what we do. And because most of us deal with sins that we can hide, we do it. And we know enough Bible that people think we're spiritual, so we're set. And we hide within churches. Being able to recite enough to get by, but be dead inside completely because there's sin in our lives that we haven't been able to get through. We hide it. Stop settling for cleaned up bondage. Freedom is not shackles. And so often we allow ourselves to be shackled not just by sin, but also shame. And it's shame that we put on ourselves that's not biblical, not scriptural, but it's cultural. It's generational. So much of what we deal with is from our parents and grandparents. And from those around us who tell us that's what we're supposed to do. But cleaned up bondage is not freedom. Just because you look better doesn't mean you are better. Lastly, live as someone who has already been raised with Christ. Galatians 3 says, since then you have been raised with Christ, set your hearts on things above, where Christ is, sitting at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things, for you died, and your life is now hidden with Christ in God. So many people are waiting for resurrection. If you're a Christ follower, you've already received it. That's what we believe at the baptism that we have. You have died to the old you and risen with Christ. You're already resurrected. Start acting like it. Because what the world sees is a bunch of people who claim to follow this guy in the sky, but it hasn't changed anything about their entire lives. And they get frustrated when they hear people talk about a God that loves them, but then they do things that show that they don't. People are tired of Christians who consistently claim to have a moral authority without having any actual morals. Christianity is in shambles, not because of God, but because of Christians. So how do we fix it? We live as if we're already resurrected. We live as if we actually believe this thing has already happened and not just will happen. It's so easy for us to look to the future and then hope that by the time we come near to our death, we can get it right then. But instead, Christianity calls us to live now as if Christ has already done what Christ has done, and now we get to live into that same victory, into the kingdom that God has promised us. God didn't raise you from the dead to make you a better prisoner. God raised you from the dead to set you free, to live life in abundance. Does that mean we won't sin? No, sadly. I wish that was true. We come, we claim victory, and we let the Spirit do the work, and it's not about white-knuckling. It's not about following every rule and regulation. I'm not saying that you can just go and sin freely. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is Christianity has to look different than Judaism, and you have to decide what that looks like in your life. But so often we want to go back to saying, yep, these are the things I can't do, when Jesus says this is the thing you should do. But that requires us to move. We don't like it. So how do we live in this Easter life as Easter people? How do we change and be transformed by the Spirit? Well, friends, the prison doors are open. The spider has been killed. But you have to decide to walk through the door, to be the person that God has called you to be. Now, Easter doesn't often fall on the first Sunday of the month, but it is a law in the Methodist Church that you do communion on the first Sunday of the month. I can't even break that law. I'm not allowed to, Patrick. I can't do it. I'm not allowed. But how fitting is it that today is the day of communion? Because it's a new covenant. In Judaism, they had a covenant that required God to be appeased. That you sin, you offer an offering, that God feels better about you now, and you can go about your way until you sin again. That's the old covenant. This is a new covenant. That whoever believes in me shall not perish, but have eternal life. That you will inherit the kingdom of God, that you will know resurrection, is the new covenant. So as we come to communion, what if you decided which covenant you're going to live by today? The old one or the new one? And which one sounds like living to the fullest?